Welcome to Amplifying Leadership. I am your host, Tara Lehman, a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is a division. This podcast is a place dedicated to amplifying your leadership through our guest stories, tips, information, and more. To learn more about all of our leadership services, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca. That's CA as in Canada. Today, I am welcoming Britt-Mari Sykes. Britt-Mari is a career counselor and founder of Canvas Career Counselling. Welcome to Amplifying Leadership, Britt-Mari.
Thank you, Tara. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, great. And I have to say, we're going to jump right into your topic because, wow, does it ever affect leaders? And so when we look at the topic of stress and burnout, and I mean, that comes up a lot with leadership with my clients and probably with yours. Why do these topics really resonate with you?
Well, first and foremost, I just see high levels of stress and burnout, and those levels are not going down. And, you know, for leaders in particular, acknowledging burnout and accepting their experiences of burnout is really hard. Yes. And we still haven't found comfortable conversations around burnout, especially for those in leadership roles, which is really a pity. So I often have clients who are leaders, who, you know, it's hard for them. It's hard for them to acknowledge, as I said before, it's hard for them to start that conversation. And even in the conversations that I have, it can be difficult to accept that, yes, I have burnout. Again, we've conflated burnout as something that doesn't happen to those with a high or excellent work ethic or, you know, a certain type of professionalism. And this just isn't the case. We're all human beings, and burnout can affect any of us at any time.
Yeah, and I love that you said a couple of key things. Number one, we are human beings. So even in leadership, stress and burnout is there, right? I mean, we do have those. I remember doing financial audits and, you know, and having the auditors there. I mean, that's stress. It's short-lived, but it's stress. And I think the other thing that really resonated with me was when you spoke about it still not being a comfortable conversation. And we need to scream that it's okay to ask for help, right? What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. And, you know, it's sort of interesting what you just said, because, I mean, good leaders lead by example.
Yes.
And I think there are a lot of teams and a lot of employees that would welcome a conversation, an openness, a normalization of issues of stress and burnout in the workplace, and are waiting for leaders to bring this into conversation, not just sort of general strategies that the team or the employee has to take on all by themselves, but to realize that this is a collective issue. Mm-hmm. And again, it can affect any of us at any time. Yeah. It doesn't hit certain people. It doesn't come at certain times in one's career. It really is, it can be experienced at any point. Something else that you mentioned, you know, again, leaders often internalize this idea that, you know, again, leadership and all the attendant responsibilities that come with leadership should somehow make them immune to burnout and stress. And this simply isn't the case. You know, there's also that pervasive narrative that leaders, well, actually all of us, have to be attentive to our work 24/7. And that if we take that on, again, it's conflated with having an excellent work ethic or a sign of our professionalism or our productivity. But again, all of these are in fact, our work ethic, our professionalism, our productivity are in fact um, diminished
Hmm.
when we say, yes, I prioritize work over
Yeah.
over everything else. And again,
Yeah.
leaders have to be careful because that message percolates down to everyone.
Bingo. It absolutely does. I always say you have to lead by example because if you're showing the stress and burnout and that causes emotions, and if you're showing that to everybody else or you're answering those emails at midnight, guess what the expectation they believe is? Same thing.
Absolutely.
I better
Yeah,
be stressed. I better react this way. I better respond to emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? It's placing that expectation on others as well. So we absolutely need to take care of ourselves. Let me ask you this.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
leaders need to review what they feel their expectations are,
Hmm.
which again gets to reflecting on leadership style. What is my leadership style? What are my expectations? And how am I communicating those expectations to those I'm leading?
Yeah. I think self-reflection is a huge part of leadership or anyone really. You really should do some self-reflection, but leaders absolutely need to do that, especially if they're starting to feel like you were saying, right? And really understand what is the style and is it working? Does it fit? Is it, things like that. And I think that can be some of the challenges that come up with, leadership and the stress and burnout that we can have. Let me ask you this. When you talk to your clients, with our ever-changing world right now, with everything going on everywhere, are you finding that some of the challenges beyond understanding their leadership style, that there's any commonalities there? Are there any main challenges that you're seeing?
Well, they're very much the same.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very much the same. How you are experiencing your
Hmm.
relationship with work and career, um, whether or not you're conscious of the expectations you place on yourself or the expectations you're internalizing, um, the degree to which, you're recognizing what other areas of your life need to be nourished. That goes
Hmm.
back to, reflective practice.
Hmm.
Um, Leaders have an opportunity to challenge the narratives that are out there. And there are a lot of leaders out there who do, in fact,
Hmm.
challenge those narratives and realize the impact it has, not only on them, but on their teams and their employees. But, burnout is experienced. I mean, it's experienced individually, but there
Hmm.
are common, I'm not sure I want to call them symptoms, but there's
Hmm.
common manifestations that we all feel that are associated with burnout. It doesn't matter whether you're a leader or you're being led. How burnout manifests is very, very similar, which again allows for, if people are willing, allows for really good, productive conversations about
Hmm.
burnout.
Yeah. So, since we're talking about this, maybe we should take a step back and define what is burnout and versus stress, and what are some of the signs that we need to look for within ourselves for that.
Yeah. So when I think about burnout, I separate it out into, physical, emotional, and cognitive
Hmm.
signs. Now, that doesn't mean that, you have one or the other. Often we experience a combination of all of these, but just in terms of separating them out, physical symptoms can be chronic fatigue, not just fatigue at the end of the week,
Hmm.
or maybe some residual fatigue on a weekend. But this is chronic fatigue, headaches, sleep disruption, disruption in eating habits. Sometimes it can manifest as shoulder pain, back pain. And I always encourage people to seek out, you know, uh, secondary support and
Yeah.
opinion from a doctor if you are feeling these physical symptoms. Emotional symptoms can be, or signs can be anger, cynicism,
Mhm.
disengagement, feeling incredibly flat and not feeling any joy at under any circumstance
Mhm.
in your life, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, increased levels of anxiousness. Um, Cognitive signs can manifest as forgetfulness, scattered
Mhm.
thoughts, unable to put things in perspective. And usually it's a combination of all these things.
Mhm.
Stress is different. Stress is a natural part of human functioning. We can have high levels of stress,
Mhm.
but it modulates. And usually with stress, we can sort of recognize, oh, this is a really big project I'm working on, and I'm putting in a lot of hours for this project. And,
Mhm.
I just have this heightened sense of, responsibility to get this project, out the door, to finish things. I recognize that. I recognize I'm putting in a lot of time, but you also know how to balance that out. And so, you may very consciously and actively be nourishing other things in your life that modulate that
Mhm.
stress. And you can bounce back. You can put it in perspective. With burnout, you lose that perspective.
Yeah.
All of those signs I described are excessive and chronic, and you really don't feel like I can't even grasp some perspective, or I can't even see a solution to
Mhm.
this. I just feel like I'm, kind of swimming in mud all the time. And it's really distressing. It's extremely distressing for people.
And so, it's probably easier for us to recognize our own stress and our own burnout. But how do we recognize that in our teams when, we're not in their head or we don't know about their pain or their aches or, all of those things? Are there things that as leaders could be signs that perhaps one of our team members is stressed or burnt out and requires further assistance that we should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're right. It's hard. It's really
Mhm.
hard. You can't get into somebody else's head, and you can't assume.
Yes.
That's also dangerous for leaders. Um, but sometimes you can start a conversation based on maybe something that you're seeing consistently, and
Hmm.
and an example of that is, disengagement,
That's a
where
good one.
somebody was once really enthusiastic about what they were doing. They really cared about what they were doing. It showed. They had a particular attitude towards work and towards colleagues. And suddenly there's a big shift, and it's not just one day, because let's face it, we all
Yeah,
have bad days.
we do.
Sometimes we even have flat weeks.
Yeah.
But this is consistent. Suddenly, that person who once loved what they were doing and really put in their all to it, suddenly, suddenly that's gone. And you're noticing that disengagement. You're noticing, that expression, phoning it in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there, you notice that where once they were, an active participant on the team, or, very engaged in some of the interpersonal relationships of the team, suddenly they're divorced from that. They've moved away
Mm-hmm.
from that. Suddenly they're much more quiet. They might not even show up for work. Suddenly
Mm-hmm.
there are more and more sick days.
Yes. Yeah.
It can really be a variety of things, but that gets to knowing your team,
Yes.
knowing your employees, and being attentive to who they are as people, so that you can notice subtle changes and not assume that they have burnout, but maybe it's a recognition. I need to have a conversation with that person.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that speaks to the pre-absenteeism that a lot of people see when people they just assume, oh, they don't want to be here anymore, or they don't like their job anymore, when it could be stress or burnout that's actually affecting them, and they just need help.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's a great place to look. Know your audience is what I always say. So you alluded to that with know your employees,
Know
how
your
they work.
employees, know your team, take the time to get to know how they function at work
Hmm.
and what their work means to them. When you get to know that personal connection someone has with their work, their why. Why do
Hmm.
I love this job? Why do I love this work? Why am
Yeah.
I here? When you allow yourself as a leader to get to know some of that content, you will recognize when that's being
Hmm.
chipped away. And when that personal connection to what you're doing breaks, it opens space for burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to come back to something that you mentioned as well. We both want everybody to know that if you're feeling pain or depression or things like that, absolutely seek medical advice from your family practitioner. It's really
Absolutely.
important to make sure there isn't an underlying condition there as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about those people who are burnt out or stressed and they are working those 60-hour work weeks, or 50-hour work weeks, some people more than that. When work takes too much of a priority over our life, can you share some ways that perhaps our leaders can ensure that life happens as well? Because we do need to live our life. It's not just about work in most cases, I'll say. So, what can we do to ensure that we have life and it's not just about work?
Yeah. Yeah. The expression work-life balance,
Hmm.
I like to reframe that as work-life balancing.
Okay.
Um, balance sounds as though it's a formula
It
that
does.
that we
Yeah.
can that we can attain and attach. And balancing implies that we are actively engaged in our lives on a daily basis and
Hmm.
that we can activate, our reflective muscles. We can assess how we're experiencing our lives. We can assess and reflect on how engaged we are. And again, I encourage everyone to really, use those muscles. It's
Hmm.
balancing, recognizing that our lives need constant monitoring and reflection. Life is about making adjustments. Life is about learning. I mean, we're experiential beings. We're
Hmm.
experiencing our lives all the time. We are learning. We're integrating new things and new information. We can use all that to make adjustments to our lives, and that includes nourishing other areas of our lives. But again, as leaders, we do have to, and I mentioned this earlier, we do have to assess what leadership means to us
Hmm.
and assess the narratives about leadership that we've internalized. Because when we have a handle on that, and then we draw in this idea of work-life balancing, this is something I'm actively engaged in every day. And then we can look at our own lives and say, what other areas of my life, what other interests do I need to nourish? Because when I do nourish these other areas, I am in fact a better leader.
I
But
love
that
that.
means, but that means changing the narrative, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Because again, if we don't value the idea that nourishing other areas of our lives does in fact make us better leaders, we won't go there. We won't
Yeah.
entertain it.
Yeah. And it goes by leading by example again and not sending
Leading
those
by
emails
example.
out at midnight. Right?
Yes,
You know,
exactly. As opposed to nourishing a good night's sleep or nourishing,
exactly. Yeah.
nourishing an activity in the evening. that
Yeah.
you really value as an individual or as a family member, and realizing that pulling away from your work actually makes you more engaged and
Yeah.
ultimately a better leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do love that you brought up sleep because when I have a leader who's feeling stressed or burnout, my first question is, what are your sleep habits? And let's work there because sleep you need. You absolutely need to be effective in life and at work. And so if you have,
Absolutely.
yeah, sleep habits. I love that you
Yeah.
brought that up. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep and water. You know,
Yes.
how
Yeah.
many of us are riding on far too much caffeine and not enough water through the day? How
Yeah.
many of us skip a meal? And again, if
Hmm.
we are dysregulated, if our nervous systems are dysregulated, again, it affects how we think, it affects how we perceive and feel our way through the day. Everything's interconnected.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. We talked about sleep and, the water, the eating. What other suggestions do you have for our audience that they could maybe integrate into their lives if they are feeling overwhelmed or those increased levels of stress, or maybe they've moved to burnout? Are there any, great little habits that we can start? Sleep, obviously, water, eating correctly. Anything else that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I would say integrate daily reflective practice.
Yeah, I
Now
like that.
that sounds like a lot, but this is something we have. This is a skill we all have at our fingertips, and it doesn't have to take more than 10 or 15 minutes each day. Sometimes, people find that very effective midday. Other people find it enormously effective and beneficial at the end of the workday. But, take 10 or 15 minutes. How did I experience my day? What stood out for me? What went well and why? What was challenging and why? I
Hmm.
mean, not only does that generate a lot of information about how you're literally navigating your day, but it reminds you that not every day is the same.
Hmm.
It reminds you to stay present because the more present you are, you're able to, again, activate perspective and tweak anything that you want to change, but
Hmm.
also celebrate something that you've done or something that you've contributed that has allowed someone else to thrive. We
Hmm.
need that. We need these things. Again, it
Yeah.
helps change the way we think, but it also helps change the conversations that we have. Um,
Yeah.
and so, again, thinking about reflective practice is at our fingertips. It's not a
Yeah. Easy.
strategy that we have to take
Yeah.
from the outside. We don't have to buy it.
Yeah, it's
we,
it's
we
nice and easy.
literally
Yeah.
we literally have it. And again, some people think, oh, reflective practice takes hours. No, no, no. Even a habit of 10 or 15 minutes. And if you do it at the end of the day, it is a lovely demarcation
Yes.
between the
Yes.
workday and sliding into other areas of your life that are really valuable and worth nourishing.
I absolutely love that. I myself do a quick self-reflection, did I achieve my goal today? And if not, why? How can I persevere? How can I grow as a person? It's not always about work either. It's just I love self-reflection and like you said, if it's new to you, start simple. Ask yourself a couple basic questions. Take 10 minutes. You don't have to journal if you're not a journaler. Just
Oh,
really do
yeah,
that. Yeah, just do that
absolutely.
reflection. Yeah.
Absolutely. Some people do it when they're out walking the dog. Some people
Yeah.
do it while they're driving home. Some people, take a quick walk after work for 10 or 15 minutes before they get in the car or get on the
Hmm.
subway or
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
train or whatever, and just, allow themselves to go, how did I experience that day? And again, integrate a celebration in there.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
So,
then, of course, sorry, Tara,
no,
I would
that's
also,
okay.
I would just also add that, seek out support and conversation. I
Yes.
know this is very challenging for leaders. Again, sometimes leaders feel that they can't seek out
Hmm.
support or don't feel that they can get confidential conversation, and that simply adds to their isolation and adds to
Absolutely.
their experiences of stress. But whether it is your family physician, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a career counselor, whether it's a coach, whether it's a family member, reach out for conversation and
Yeah.
support. It's vital. We're all interconnected. We need support around us. We cannot do much alone.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's going back to the don't let this be a hidden topic, folks. We want you to talk about it. We want to know
Normalize
that
it.
normalize the conversation around stress and burnout. In today's world, most of my clients come to me with something to do with that, or that's a part of why they're coming to me. And I think we really need to normalize the conversation around that stress and burnout shouldn't be the norm,
Hmm.
right? So if you
Yeah,
have it, let's talk. Love
yeah.
that. Let me ask you for one quick last tip before we wrap up our conversation. So I do have soon to be leaders or leaders who wish to be, or even new leaders in our audience. So I'm wondering if around this topic, if you took all of the tips that you shared, or maybe that you still have, is there one that you could give those new or soon to be leaders that is the first step to an effective workday to reduce any possibilities of stress and burnout?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think I would start with something that we've talked about a little earlier, which is
Mm-hmm.
leaders lead by example.
Love it.
So monitor, reflect on, and really observe what are you what are you putting out there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
What
love
is
that.
what is the messaging that you're sending your team or your employees? And to be really mindful that you lead by example. So if you nourish, as I've said several times, if you nourish and value other areas of your life and other interests, and this shows and it's reflected in the quality of your leadership, your team and your employees
Mm-hmm.
see this. You're
Yeah.
sending a really strong message to your team and your employees to be mindful of how they're experiencing their workday, how they're experiencing their relationship with work and career, how they're experiencing the relationships they have at
Mm-hmm.
work. You're reminding them that there is value in nourishing their whole lives. And by
Yeah.
doing that, you are changing the conversation. And again, that goes back to you are normalizing that when we nourish our whole lives, when we value our whole lives, we in fact increase our professionalism, our productivity, our work ethic is not diminished.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Britt-Marie, if our audience wants to learn a little bit more about what you do, or how you can help them, is there a way they can find you online?
Yes, anyone who's interested can go to my website, www.mycareercanvas.co. That's .co. You can reach me on Instagram at mycareercanvas. I think those are two of the easiest ways that you can reach me.
Great. I want to thank you today for helping us hopefully normalize this conversation a little bit more in the workplace. It's something that is absolutely needed to be talked about. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and tips today.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Tara. It was great speaking with you.
All right. Of course, we want to thank our audience as well. We do hope you are able to gain some valuable information or tips today. If you are a leader who knows that leadership coaching, consulting, or community are the way to grow on your leadership journey, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca, a Twin Life Coaching and Business Services division. Until next time, please be safe and be an amazing leader. or leader to be.